The BBC is a great British institution, and it plays a vital role in our culture and in our creative economy. It broadcasts our values and identities all over the world, reaching hundreds of millions of people every day. In January 2022, the government and BBC agreed a 6-year funding settlement, which froze the licence fee at £159 for 2 years. The 2-year freeze has already saved every fee payer £17 over 2022 and 2023. This settlement provided vital support for households when inflation was at its highest, while giving the BBC the funding it needed to deliver on its remit. Under the terms of the settlement, the licence fee must now increase annually in line with CPI, with the first increase due in April 2024. The government is committed to supporting families as much as possible during these difficult times. We recognise bill rises are never welcome and family budgets remain under pressure. Today, I am announcing that we will use the annual rate of CPI in September to calculate the increase of the BBC licence fee in April 2024. This, Madam Deputy Speaker, is the same way the government calculates inflation-linked increases to state pensions and benefits. This decision means next year's licence fee increase will be kept as low as possible. In April, the licence fee will rise by 6.7% to £169.50 annually. This will minimise the rise for households, keeping it to £10.50 over the year, or 88p a month, rather than the rise of £14.50, which would have happened under the previous CPI measure. Whilst we recognise that household budgets remain under pressure, this decision, alongside the 2-year freeze, will save individual licence fee payers over £37 by the end of 2024. These interventions support households, whilst also providing the BBC with £3.8 billion to produce its world-leading content. The government engaged with both the BBC and S4C to understand the impacts on the finances of both broadcasters. This decision will also ensure that S4C, which is also funded from the licence fee, can maintain its unique role promoting the Welsh language and supporting our public service broadcasting landscape. Madam Deputy Speaker, although we have taken steps to ensure the uplift is kept as low as possible, we recognise that a £10.50 increase will still be felt by licence fee payers. The number of licence fee payers is also declining, with an increasingly competitive media landscape. We need to make sure that the cost of the BBC does not rise exponentially, nor that it is borne by a smaller number of fee payers. We've already seen an increasing number of households choosing not to hold a TV licence. The number of households holding TV licences fell by 400,000 last year and has declined by about 1.7 million since 2017 to 18. This is placing increasing pressure on the BBC's licence fee income. We are also seeing a rapidly changing media landscape with more ways for audiences to watch content. Reach and viewing of broadcast TV fell significantly in 2022, with reach falling from 83% in 2021 to 79% in 2022. As this trend continues, linking the TV licence to watching live TV will become increasingly anachronistic as audience viewing habits continue to move to digital and on-demand media. We know that if we want the BBC to succeed, we cannot freeze its income. But at the same time, we cannot ask households to pay more to support the BBC indefinitely. We are already supporting the BBC to realise commercial opportunities which will make it more financially sustainable, and will continue to explore these provisionally with the BBC. This situation clearly shows the need to consider the BBC's funding arrangements to make sure they are fair for the public and sustainable for the BBC. Therefore, I am announcing today that the government is launching a review of the BBC's funding model. The review will look at how we can ensure the funding model is fair to the public, sustainable for the long term, and supports the BBC's vital role in growing our creative industries. The review will be led by DCMS and supported by an expert panel. It will assess a range of options for funding the BBC. We are clear that we want the BBC to succeed. The review will include looking at how the BBC can increase its commercial revenues to reduce the burden on licence fee payers. Given pressure on household incomes, I can explicitly rule out that this review will look at creating any new taxes. The findings of the review will support the government to make an informed choice on whether to consult the public on moving to alternative funding models. This would take place as part of the Charter review process, where any final decision on reforming the BBC's funding model would be taken. Madam Deputy Speaker, the BBC is a great national institution, and we want to ensure it is fit for the present and whatever the future holds, while keeping costs down for the public. This means ensuring the BBC is supported by a funding model that is fair to audiences, supports the creative industries, and is sustainable in the age of digital and on-demand media. I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Secretary of State, Thangam Debonette.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, working people listening to the Secretary of State's pitiful comments on support with the cost of living crisis are not fooled. They see exactly what this is. We've had weak, mealy-mouthed platitudes that will make no material difference to their lives. 33 pence a month per household is what I understand the difference to be between today's announcement and the deal the government already agreed to. Now, that's not nothing, but does she really think that's going to even touch the sides? Is she the Prime Minister? Are they so out of touch that they think that this is going to get people through the Tory cost of living crisis? They crashed the economy, sending mortgages and rents sky high. They hiked taxes on working people. They have presided over 13 years of stagnant economic growth, Madam Deputy Speaker, 13. And what is the cost of the government's announcement today? The creative industries are one of the best sources of economic growth and quality jobs in the country, and the BBC is the biggest commissioner of work in the creative industries. So, has the Secretary of State worked out what the impact of choosing that particular inflationary measure will have on economic growth and jobs? Has she worked out what it will have on the other creative businesses they commission and on their supply chains? Has she worked out what this difference will make on the BBC's crucial role as our soft power superpower that promotes brand Britain around the world? Has she worked out what the impact will be on democracy, given the BBC's role as the most trusted source of news anywhere in the world? And when it comes to the funding model review, I understand the terms of reference are overtly focused on the commercial side of the BBC. Why is she seemingly, I didn't hear a word about the public service element of the BBC. She mentions an expert panel. Can she tell us who will be on the panel, what the timetable will be that they work to? Can she tell us where the public service element will feature in the government's terms of reference? Has the government actually given up on the BBC as a public service broadcaster? I'm afraid to say, Madam Deputy Speaker, it all sounds like yet more broken Tory promises. This is no way to treat one of our great institutions, no way to treat millions of people who work at the BBC, their partners and people around the country who value them so much, because let's not forget, this comes on the back of a 2-year freeze, which has already had a damaging impact. We've just got more and more signs at the moment, Madam Deputy Speaker, of which is just the latest of chaotic decision-making, of a failing government led by a Prime Minister too weak to control his own party, and ministers making working people pay for their mistakes. And it is a sign of the disdain the Tories have for this role that there's been 12 Secretaries of State in those 13 years, topping the reshuffle chart, which brings instability to this department which is a department for economic growth. Madam Deputy Speaker, our great institutions, our public services and working people just can't take any more of this chaos. Labour backs the BBC, will grow our creative industries, will spread the benefits across the country, and a general election, Madam Deputy Speaker, cannot come a moment too soon.
Secretary.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I think the Shadow Secretary of State needs to live in the real world like the rest of us. People are struggling with the cost of living, and the government has continued to take steps to protect them, she needs to live in the real world. That the media landscape, Madam Deputy Speaker, is changing, and it is totally inappropriate to just sit still and do nothing, because that does two things. It destroys the BBC and it will make it unable to live in this changing world. And it does nothing to protect licence fee payers. And if that's the Labour plan, then I don't want to see it. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Shadow Secretary of State talked about what we are doing for working families. She knows that this is not the only step that we're taking. We've spent £97 billion supporting families across the country, saving people, typical family, around £3,300 to support them, cutting inflation by a half. She mentions, Madam Deputy Speaker, the creative industries. Well, she might have forgotten, Madam Deputy Speaker, that since I have been in this role, I've done tax reliefs to support the creative industries, voted against by that party. In fact, for 10 years, year on year, the Conservative Party have brought in tax reliefs for the creative industries, voted down by the other side on every single occasion. They do not support the creative industries. Their Secretary of State for Education said we should be spending more money not on the creative industries in schools but others. But under this Conservative government, the creative industries are growing at double the rate of the rest of the economy and employing 2 million people. So I will happily update her on other details in relation to the panel. The timetable for this is that this report will come into play to me by the autumn of 2024.